You're looking at what was one of the first examples of real-time 3D interactive computer graphics. After years of punch cards and plotter drawings, this was like science fiction. The instant feedback of real-time response was amazing. I felt like we had jumped into the future and was not hard to understand the implications. Just to touch the screen with a light pen and the object goes to that position was an extraordinary experience. No big deal today, but we had to show the world how it could be done even though it was primitive technology. We used a PDP 1145 computer and a vector general drawing display. It could only draw lines since there was no raster graphics available commercially. This appeared a few years later. We achieved the appearance of solid surfaces by simply packing lines close together. There was hidden line removal, but no lighting models or shadows, which came later with raster graphics. I think it was 1974 or 1975 when we began using a frame buffer with run-length encoding techniques. The basic purposes of this project was to look at the man-machine interface, techniques of motion control, 3D data generation, and languages for animation. This was uncharted territory with no guidelines. One must remember there was no commercial software which did not begin to appear until about 10 years later. Those were the early days of computer graphics, and we had to solve everything. While it was very frustrating, at the same time there was great excitement about doing something which was new. It was clearly a simulation of reality, and somebody else invented the phrase virtual reality, which is a more clever way of saying the same thing. Well, when we say virtual reality, I've been told that Plato actually thought of this idea first. At least he came up with the concept. This is our first airplane. Of course, you have to give the impression that the computer is designing the airplane. There has to be a little bit of science fiction in there. Slowly putting it together. Art student by the name of Wayne Bennett put this together. In those days, we weren't thinking so much in terms of jet aircraft, or maybe it was my background with World War II, thinking of fighter planes with propellers. Manfred Kniemeyer, Tom DeFonte, and Leslie Miller developed the software which made all of this possible. In 1972, I wrote a paper about computer art, and I commented about the idea of real-time interactive art objects. I could see where the technology would eventually take us. I tried for 2 years to get the paper published, but nobody in the art community took it seriously. Finally, in 1974, the IEEE published it, and my comments about real-time art objects are on the SIGGRAPH.org website. After nearly 40 years, the technology has caught up with the idea. 3D game engines like 3D Unity are pointing to something I dreamed about those many years ago. For someone who came from a background of punch cards and plotter drawings, the idea of real-time interactive computer graphics was truly like science fiction. Imagine touching the screen and the object goes to that position. And to having that kind of control updated in real time. And I remember when I first looked at this, I would just stare at it for hours. I couldn't believe my eyes. As a mode of communication, we used buttons and dials that represented certain parameters of control. This butterfly, I loved this butterfly. I can't begin to tell you the hours I spent just playing with it. Imagine driving a butterfly, steering a butterfly, especially in 1969, 70, 72, somewhere in there. It was kind of amazing. I know today's generation say, what's the big deal? Well, you go back in time and see what we had to work with, then you might think it was a big deal. And it was such a pleasure to be able to direct these creatures around in the screen space, and simultaneously having them do the same thing, which is a trivial thing with today's technology. And of course you've got to have mythical creatures working with butterflies. And more butterflies. I could never get enough of butterflies. What do you do with the butterflies? You've got to put them inside of a globe. That's all you got is data. Watch this. In the background, there's an explosion. We did the first explosion. Imagine that.